Let's start off with the quarterback position. And it was a huge drop off in play from week 1 to week 2. It was absolutely huge. I see a lot of people pointing to the fact that it might be rust. I don't think it is. I think it was just bad play. From week 1, the way he played in week 1, the way Jay Cutler played, he was efficient. His ball placement was nice. He missed one wide open receiver. That was Jarvis Landry. And he managed the clock well on the road. He did everything you want a quarterback to do. And then in week 2, totally different. Not just his fault, and we're going to get into that, but he did not manage to play clock well. His ball placement was terrible. His efficiency was obviously terrible. His timing was terrible. He didn't see the field very well. He missed a lot of wide open receivers. There was obviously Kenny Stills, the start of his second half drive. He had him wide open, and I think he was one-on-one with I don't know if it was with the safety, but he was one-on-one with somebody over in the middle of the football field, and you give him a good ball there, not only does he get the first down and a big chunk of yards, but he can make his man miss maybe, and pick up some even more yards. It could be a potential huge play there, and obviously we needed that from the abysmal first half that we had to the second half. That would definitely have sparked our offense up a little bit, got the momentum back on our side. So I think overall, what we need from Jay Cutler is to manage this offense, and just be efficient, get the ball into the playmakers' hands. And again, it wasn't just his fault, but a big part of this game was him, especially on the offensive side of the football. He just did not hit open receivers. I mean, he had Jarvis Landry wide open in the end zone. Literally nobody even close to him. We did a play-action pass. For some reason, the Jets fell for it. We were down so much, I have no idea why. And Jarvis Landry was wide open in the end zone. And you can't miss those types of throws. You just can't. I thought timing was terrible in this game. The timing was way off. I thought execution of any kind of play was terrible in this game. You can't wait to the play clock's at 1. Obviously, people either don't know what they're going to be doing. I mean, we couldn't get the play call in. I guess that had some to do with the crowd noise, but, Jay Cutler just did not manage the play clock well. He didn't get it was just totally different of management like I said in the last game. He did a great job of dictating the pace of the game. In this game, he did not. He just didn't. It felt like we were just a tsunami was just washing us over the entire game. We just could not stop it. And when it rains, it pours in football. So I just thought Jay Cutler did not get the ball into his playmaker's hands fast enough. I thought he held on to the ball way too long. It was just a totally different performance from, week 1 to week 2. And again, not all of it was his fault. A lot of people in this game, which we're going to talk about, had a terrible football game that they usually don't have. And I think this is, to say the least, I don't know. We just didn't come out with the same energy that we did last week. And again, a lot of that has to do with the leadership on this football team. If you don't like what's happening on the football field, then somebody needs to grab somebody and say, listen, we cannot continue to play this flat. Because we came out so flat on offense. Totally different on defense, and we're going to talk about that. I felt like the defense came out well. But as an offense, you can't get onto the football field. In the first 3 drives of the game, first of all, it's 0-0 on the scoreboard. You have a chance to really go ahead on the road and you don't get it done. That's on your offense. That's not on your defense. That's on your offense. The defense got off to a great start. The offense did not. And I thought the offense by far had the worst performance of the day. And a lot of that had to do with Jay Cutler. He just did not get the ball in his playmakers' hands. And again, not all of his fault. Some of it was play calling again this week, and we're going to talk about that as well. But I just felt like, he needed to get the ball out quicker. Obviously, he missed wide open receivers, and obviously managing of the play clock was abysmal. So just a big drop off from week 1 to week 2, and not to make excuses for Jay because he did not have a great performance, but the entire offense just for some reason was so flat. And you could just, even off the first few drives of the game, you're like, what is going on? Like, there was no energy. There was no. It was a lot of frustration. It was not the same Dolphins offense we saw in week 1. And again, if you remember in week 1, we were playing a better defense, and we drove down the field on the very first possession. And obviously we had to settle for 3, but that's still a really good job on the road to get off to a great start on offense. Totally different story in week 2. Came out flat, never could get anything going. Cutler really just couldn't get in a rhythm, and that's another thing. This offense never got in a rhythm, and Jay Cutler could never get them in a rhythm. It was just flat. It was flat. It was bad. So Jay Cutler from week 1 to week 2, just not the same like, not again, the entire offense, and we're going to talk about that, but the entire offense just really let everybody down this game. And Jay Cutler did not have a good game at all. Alright, so let's talk about the play calling a little bit. This is a super nitpicky thing. This is not major by any stand, because to be honest with you guys, if you go back and you watch that game, and we're talking about play calling, all the calls that Adam called were not executed at all. Every single one of these calls were not executed, especially in the running game. I mean, we did not. The penetration in the interior of our offensive line was like we were playing a Hall of Fame defensive line, just filled with Hall of Famers in the interior. They have some good players. They have Leonard Williams, but Steve McClendon constantly getting on our backfield is unacceptable, especially with Mike Pouncey back there and the players that we have on that offensive line. That is 100% unacceptable. And we just were not physical enough. I don't know, we were flat. We didn't have that attitude that we usually do on the offensive line. It just was not there today or yesterday. And that's not on Adam Gase. But what I'm about to say is, again, not on Adam Gase, because 100% of those calls are on the players, and the execution on offense was abysmal. So with saying that, I felt like the first 3 drives we couldn't get anything going. You know, we had good field position. Our defense was doing their job on the road. You get 3 chances to go ahead. You got to capitalize on one of those chances, especially against a bad Jets team. So what I felt like was happening is we were trying to force the running game to happen. It just wasn't happening. All of our under center runs were getting blown up because the interior of our offensive line couldn't block that game. I felt like we should have got away from it earlier than we did to spark the offense. Obviously, it's not working. Every time we ran a run play, we were in down and distance. I felt like it just was not working. The thing that frustrated me the most is there was a lot of times where we passed on first down, and again, the execution of this game was god-awful, and then we ran in on second down, and then we had a 3rd and long. And the running game was not working. I felt like Adam needed to get away from at least some of the running plays that we were calling. I felt like some of the run plays out of the shotgun worked a little bit better. Obviously, you're not going to lose as many yards on those plays as an outside zone run under center, a stretch play. So I felt like we needed to get away from the running game earlier than we did, and especially the way we were doing it, because obviously we couldn't keep them out of the backfield, especially the interior of the offensive line. So I felt on those first 3 drives we were super repetitive. I felt like we needed to get away from some of that stuff and try something different because it was not working. And again, super nitpicky because the execution was terrible. This is not on Adam, but I felt like he needed to get away from some of that stuff earlier on. We were just trying to force it so hard. And I understand that, this Jay is a very big part of this offense. But when you look back last year, there was a lot of games where our passing game had to pick it up. When you look at the 49ers game, the running game was non-existent in that game. When you look at the LA Rams game, the running game was non-existent in that game. That was all passing. I mean, the last 14 and the last 5 minutes of the game, that was all passing. You look at the Chargers game, that was all passing. So the passing game could have picked it up. We're too talented for it not to. It just didn't happen for us this game. And we left a lot of points on the football field. We left a lot of big plays on the football field. And again, not Adam Gase's fault, but I felt like we should have got away from some of that stuff a little bit earlier. And we just didn't. And we did not get off to a faster start. I thought that could have helped us a little bit and not be so repetitive. Really, and I felt like that was the reason we were getting down a distance, is they just continued to get penetration to the backfield on those outside runs, and we needed to stop it. All of those under center runs were terrible all day, and we just didn't get away from it fast enough. So that's just a nitpick, and again, we have too much talent on this football field, especially versus the Jets, to let that happen, and that's not on Adam, that's on players executing the play. Alright, let's talk about the offensive line. I have no idea what the heck was going on with this offensive line. It played so bad that it baffles me how bad they were playing. To allow the penetration that they did on some of those running plays is absolutely unacceptable. absolutely unacceptable. And knowing the fact that any NFL offense, if you get down a distance on a consistent basis, almost every time you have possession of the football, you're not going to have a good day on offense. And our offensive line continued to do that. Not just in the running game, but in blitz pickups, they were terrible. And again, some of that's on Jay. Not only was it on the offense, because the communication on offense was obviously very bad, but you would think Mike Pouncey, I mean, some of these players, obviously Mike's a very smart football player. He's been around the league a while. This isn't the first time we've played Todd Bowles as a defense. We know what he likes to do. We know he likes to send heat, especially, from the slot corner position or the safety position. We know that he does that. The blitz pickup was terrible today. It was absolutely terrible. Offensive line, talking about a healthy Dolphins offensive line, that was the worst performance of a healthy Dolphins offensive line that I think I've ever seen. Especially against a team like this. Like, it felt like this offensive line did not come out with the intensity that they needed to. They came out flat. They were not physical enough. And that was, I don't know if that was due to overlooking the opponent that we were playing. I have no idea. But every Sunday, you should go out with that, fire and that, that energy. And the offensive line just did not play with any of that all day long. They were just getting beat up on the entire game. They were just getting beat up. I mean, they were not nearly physical enough. The execution of plays was terrible. You saw a lot of the offensive linemen with their heads down. It was terrible. I mean, the offensive line needs to pick it up. When you're playing that bad throughout the game, and it's not hard to point to what position is not, picking it up. It was definitely the offensive line. I mean, out of the quarterback, the receivers, and the running back, the offensive line by far had the worst day. I don't think I've ever seen Mike Pouncey have this bad of a game. I mean, it was just bad. And it was clear that, again, not to overplay the emotions of the game, and because, something you hear that a lot, and a lot of it had to do with schematics, and a lot of it had to do with play execution, and a lot of it had to do with individual play. But the offensive line just did not come out, and the entire offense just did not come out with enough energy on the road. It felt like it just was like watching. It was terrible. It was just terrible. It was a flat, like they were zombies out there. There's no emotion at all. So the offensive line just got beat up on. I don't know if they thought they could just show up. That's what it felt like. Terrible job by the offensive line. And to be honest, almost zero positives from the offensive line. At least in the passing game, we had some good signs with some back shoulder fades. Devontae Parker had a relatively good game, even though most of his stats were in garbage time. Same thing with Juice. I felt like he was active all day. But, the offensive line, they were just, to be honest, there's zero positives on that offensive line. And just a bad job by them all around. And you just can't come out like that as an offensive line. You cannot come out with that. They just got beat up on. All right, let's talk about the front seven. I thought the front seven played well. I didn't think they played terrible at all. I thought the first few the first few drives especially, they were dominant. They were really beating up on the Jets' offensive line, which is a very, very, very bad offensive line. And they did their job. I thought the run defense was really good those first few drives. And the reason it progressively got worse throughout the game is because the Jets had the ball for half an hour and we only had it for 9 to 10 minutes on offense. That is so lopsided. Like, it's insane. So that's on the offense. That's on the defensive line. You can't blame that. It doesn't matter what kind of defensive line you have. If the offense has the ball for that long, especially at home, and it was really hot on that particular day in MetLife, then of course your defensive line is going to wear down. And of course they're going to break some runs because you're just tired. But I thought the front seven set the tone early. I mean, most of the positive things on those first few drives were the defensive line. I thought the interior was active. I thought Sue had a good game. Devon Gottschall, he had some bonehead rookie plays, but I thought for some of the plays that he was out there, he played well. Chase Allen, he had some really good open field tackles where some other people missed the tackles. He came in and cleaned it up pretty nicely and pretty quick, by the way. So I thought the front seven did well. It just, they wore down over, as the game went along because they were out there for so dang long. And they really couldn't get pressure on the quarterback. Even though they did, obviously Branch had a sack, Wake had a sack. Again, the defensive line set the tone early. The secondary did not do a good job of giving the defense time long enough to rush the passer, and we'll talk about that after this. But again, the defensive line, this is not on them. They had a good game, especially earlier on. The reason it progressively got worse and worse and worse is because they were on the field for so dang long. Not their dang fault. I mean, I felt like they dominated. I felt like they set the tone early on their offensive line, and I felt like that would have been a bigger factor if the offense could have got going and the secondary, held up their end of the bargain as well. So not their fault at all. All right, let's talk about the secondary and the linebackers in coverage as well. They played, pretty much just bad throughout the entire game. And, for the first few drives, they held up their end of the bargain. But situational awareness was terrible by the secondary in this game. Even our best players, Rashad Jones, he had a relatively good game, but he also had some bad plays. He took some bad angles to the football on some plays. So the secondary overall just did not have a good day. The corners, Byron Maxwell continues to let people get across his body. He's always struggled against quicker, smaller receivers. He just doesn't have the quickness to keep up with some of these guys. I think that's why especially if he recognizes the matchup against a smaller, quicker guy, he needs to get up in them and be physical with them. He can't play off on those guys, or he's just going to have a long day. Xavier Howard, the same thing. He followed up a bad performance in San Diego with another bad performance against New York, which is absolutely unacceptable considering the fact that we went up against a Jets receiver corps that is filled with rookies and young players that are unproven talents in this league, and that are, to be frank with you guys, they're not very good. So I don't understand. The secondary just played terrible. Xavier played terrible. Byron played terrible. Rashad Jones took some bad angles to the football. Nate Allen, he played not so good at all. Altron Werner obviously played terrible. He let up the biggest play in the secondary all game long to Willie Anderson. So it was just a bad performance all day long. Going back to situational awareness, there was some times where the Jets were backed up. There was like a 3rd and long, but if they get 5 to 10 yards, they're in field goal range. So as a secondary, you got to realize that, and as a defense, you got to realize that. That's just situational football. We can't play soft coverage on those plays, and okay, we gave up a field goal. When you have a chance to, get up into the receiver's face and let your defensive line get after the quarterback and make those throws tougher for Josh McCown. He is not a good quarterback. He is bad with ball placement. He is late with throws. He holds onto the ball way too long. Why we were playing soft coverage on 3rd and longs, I have no idea. We are not playing Tom Brady. We are playing Josh McCown. Why, we can't just settle for, okay, we did our job, and we're not going to take the risk of, playing man coverage and, giving up a big play. When we're playing Josh McCown. And again, situational awareness in those as a defense and as a defensive coordinator was bad. And we're going to get into the play calling on defense right after this, which I thought was pretty bad throughout the game. But the secondary really could have done a better job of giving our defensive line better, more time to rush the passer. In the middle of the football field, coverage was terrible. Our linebackers' coverage was terrible. Zones, there was busted coverage all over the place. That one deep crossing route to our Darius Stewart, that was just bad. I mean, that throw was terrible. If we had any relatively half-decent coverage on that play, that's at least incomplete and/or an interception because of how bad that throw was. So, secondary just played terrible all game long. Not just Byron. It was Xavier too. It was Rashad too. He had his moments as well. So there were players out there that we expect more of. And, football goes hand in hand. If one group is failing, the other one's it's gonna hurt the other one as well. If we had a lead at any point in time in this game, and the Jets were forced to pass a lot, and our pass rush was able to get after Josh McCown at a consistent basis, we would have crap and killed them. We would have killed that team. We just didn't do any of that. And, a lot of that had to do with our secondary, but I think from a schematic standpoint, we have to change a lot. But again, the secondary just did not. There was a lot of really open passing lanes for Josh McCown. And again, if we had relatively good coverage on some of those throws, they at least would have been incomplete and/or an interception. But some of these, and again, the throws were bad. it was just so wide open. All right, let's talk about Matt Burke and some of the play calling that has been going on for the last 2 weeks. It just needs to stop. The personnel recognition from Matt Burke is terrible. He needs to recognize what kind of personnel he has. He needs to recognize the strengths of his players and utilize those strengths. And stop trying to outsmart the opponent. Just recognize what your players do well and utilize those talents. Put your players in a schematic situation that benefits them. Not that you think, oh, we're gonna outsmart the quarterback here. We're gonna drop some defensive linemen back in coverage. We're gonna zone blitz. Don't stop, because it just does not work with this football team. We need to realize that Xavier and Byron are man press corners. We can just do that. Make the throwing window tough for the opponent, especially against Josh McCown. We should have played man defense the entire game and let our defensive line go to work and stop trying to be so fancy with some of these calls, some of these exotic blitzes. They're just bad. Recognize the personnel that we have on this football field and utilize their strengths. If we gave Josh McCown man coverage looks the entire game and made him make a difficult throw, we're going to get at least one interception. I can tell you that off that Ardarius Stewart play. If we had man coverage on that play, we put Byron on him in a man press situation or something like that, an errant throw like that is going to be picked off all day. At least we would have got a ball tipped in the air, force turnovers, make it hard on Josh McCown. Some of those throwing lanes, again, were wide open because of the defense that we called. Make it tough for him. Utilize the personnel that we have on this football field. And we didn't do that. And that's on Matt Burke. It was a bad day for everybody. It wasn't just the players. Some of it was the game plan. That just frustrates me. When we're going up against the quarterback, the caliber of Josh McCown, why are we trying to, he's a veteran player. Why are we trying to outsmart the man? Just beat him. Just beat him. Just put man-to-man coverage and beat him. Don't try to do anything fancy. Don't try to outsmart your opponent. You know that we have better talent than their talent. Line up and beat the man from across from you. That's what we should have done. And we didn't do that on defense. And Matt has to recognize that. And hopefully he realizes that, okay, this just does not work for the personnel on this defense. We have to do more of this, and this. If he does that, then our defense is going to have a better day all around. And he just needs, again, recognize the personnel and utilize their strengths. Because right now it just isn't working. All right, so some final thoughts on the entire game. And from an offensive perspective, the execution was just bad throughout the entire game. We came out flat. We didn't help out our defense in time of possession. Again, that has to do with pace. We just didn't dictate the pace. We didn't handle the play clock well. It hurt our defense. We did not give our defense a chance to really get after their quarterback and make them try to come from behind early on. If we did that on the road on those first 3 drives, at least got 6 points, 2 field goals, which isn't asking a lot considering the talent on this football team, and put that Jets team in a situation where they have to come back from behind, we would have killed that team. It wouldn't have even been close. We would have killed them. And we just didn't do that on offense. And that's on the offense. They need to get off to a better start for our defense. And a lot of this game had to do with the offense. Unless it had a whole lot more to do with the offense than it did the defense. On the defensive side of the football, the secondary needs to pick it up. The situational awareness is terrible. And, go back to that Ardarius Stewart play, which we've talked about 1,000 times. Instead of having playing zone coverage and having your linebackers look in the backfield, just play man coverage. Just play man coverage and make Josh McCown make a throw. I think some of that has to do with personnel awareness. And again, what Matt Burke was calling was not executed very well in the secondary. But they haven't been executing any of these plays very well for the last 2 years. So we need to change that up. And again, a lot of this game had more to do with the offense than it did the defense. And, people are saying that, the Jets stopped J.J. And obviously if you stop J.J., it's going to hurt the offense a little bit. But there were games last year where J.J. was shut out. And the offense on the past game picked it up. The past game just didn't pick it up this game. And again, if we got any kind of lead in those first 3 drives and let the Jets play from behind, which they didn't do the entire game, then we would have killed them on defense. If you look up at the scoreboard, We let up 20 points to a bad Jets team. Obviously, that's not good, but 20 points with the offense that we have, we should outscore every team by that. I mean, I would take that every game. If you're like, okay, we're going to only allow 20 points, our offense should score more than 20 points. I mean, that's 3 touchdowns. They should get 3 touchdowns every single game, at least. They just didn't do that. And again, that had more to do with the offense than it did the defense. Look up at the scoreboard last game. We let up, 17 points to a San Diego Chargers team that's very good on offense. And, I mean, the offense just needs to pick it up. They're too talented to only score 6 points against the Jets. So, again, this game had more to do with the offense than it did the defense. So, that is going to be it, guys. I think final thoughts on just the entire, what I think from a personal standpoint, and, not looking at it from an analytical standpoint. I think this game was not to say it was. I guess the best way to put it was obviously we laid an egg, but I think it was more of a fluke than anything. When you look around the league and some of the things that happened, it was a weird day of football. And not to bring superstition or anything stupid like that into this, because I don't believe in any of that craziness, but it was just a weird day for offenses around the league. When you look at the Steelers and what they did against the Bears, they're obviously capable of doing more than that. When you look at the Raiders and what they did against the Redskins and how bad their offense played and how talented that offense is, they only had, I think, Derek Carr had 50 yards passing in the fourth quarter. I honestly don't think that's obviously not going to happen for the rest of the year. So, and not just those games. There was many other games where teams got upset. Obviously, the Bengals almost beat Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau. We weren't the only team to lose a game that we should have won on Sunday. Like I said, you look at the Raiders and the performance that they put on. I mean, that was just as bad as our offense, if not worse. So it wasn't just us. And to hit the panic button with the talent that we have on this team, I think it's just doing a disservice to yourself. You shouldn't give up on this football team like that over this game. We're too dang talented, and again, I think this was more of a fluke, and I think this team is going to benefit from a loss like this to get off our dang high horse. And so I think we're definitely, guys, everybody needs to calm down and relax. This team is very, very talented football team. Obviously, we shouldn't have lost against the Jets. The Jets are terrible, but this team is way too talented. Way too talented. And I guarantee you guys that this team is going to put on a better show for the rest of the year. We have a great head coach. We have a lot of talent on this football team. We have a really good football team. So just enjoy it for the rest of the season. I know this last Sunday was terrible, but I think it was more of our team just had a bad day. That's what it was. That's all it was. And I think the loss we're gonna benefit from this loss than anything else. I think we learned a lot this Sunday, and obviously you saw a lot of players disappointed in themselves, which is a good sign. So that is going to be it, guys. I'm Skaggs1383. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.